and gentlemen, thank you for joining us today. My name is Matt Anderson. I'm the Director of Outreach for the Space Force Association. And today we're really happy to have the Commandant of Cadets of the United States Air Force Academy here in Colorado Springs, Major General Michele Edmondson.
Thanks, Matt.
Thank you for being here today and spending time with our members and our viewers. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity.
What an awesome week. Yeah, a big week at the Air Force Academy, coming off a big win against Navy. And I know all of our members and viewers know that that's just not a football game on the field, but a lot of work to host the game, to field the team, and what a fantastic result. So congratulations to you and the entire Academy for a job well done. Before we get on to the formal questions, I was trying to imagine myself as a cadet walking into the Commandant's office, and I was looking around this amazing view in the great office, and I saw this picture on the wall right here that, as a Space Force Association guy, I'm like, I need to know more about this. Do you mind telling us a little bit about this?
Yeah, thanks, Matt, and thanks for this opportunity. I really am excited to have you here, and let me echo, what a game, and how about those red tail uniforms?
Amazing.
It was amazing, amazing. What a tribute. So proud to be a part of that. You know, I'm really proud of this sign, and people come in my office and they kind of respond like you did. They're like, what is that? And I'm like, oh, I love it. And the fact that the team, the AFWERX team, made this for me and took the time to draw it and the cadet input, it's actually really special. So there was an AFWERX Space Challenge event back in March, and based on my background and time at the White House, they asked if I would come talk to the participants, and it was a great mix of some expertise at USAFA and industry to really talk about why a Space Force, where are we going, what does the future look like in space. And so it was a great opportunity for me to kind of, you know, share my thoughts from my time at the White House and as a 13S, the majority of my career about why did we need a Space Force. And you know, a lot of people don't have a good appreciation for what that threat is and what the future looks like. So I love the pictorial that they made and captured a lot of my thoughts. And you know, as you can see, you know, I'm a believer in this and where we're going, and I think the timing is right. We have such an incredible opportunity to do this right for our nation, for the world, to be the leaders in space. So great conversations we had with some really, really smart people thinking about what does the future look like. So thanks for noticing.
Yeah, obviously the Space Force and the space industry has a lot of science baked into it, but when you look at something like this, there's actually a lot of art that goes into this whole domain as well. So we'll move on. So you've been in your current job for about a year now. Came in as the Commandant of Cadets. Lots of amazing opportunities that we've seen over the last year with the development of the Space Force. But on a more personal side, can you tell us a little bit about your background? You mentioned it briefly there as a space operator, and yeah, more importantly, your role before you came here into the White House.
Yeah, thanks for that. And you know, really such an interesting time to be, you know, a space officer at the United States Air Force Academy when we stood up the Space Force. So I started as a second lieutenant, did my initial training, you know, up at what was Lowry Air Force Base in Denver, and I went to Buckley. So I didn't go far. I just went really across the highway as a second lieutenant, and was a missile warning guide, defense support program at the time. Loved it. You know, I thought as a second lieutenant, I had the most important job in the United States Air Force. I was the guy that was going to wake the president up if there was an ICBM attack on the continental United States. And man, that drove me every night, you know, to go to work at 10 o'clock at night in the freezing cold and work those shifts and sit on the ops floor, because I really thought that I made a huge difference in the security of the United States of America as a second lieutenant. And my dream was always to go back and command that squadron. And I had the privilege of doing that. So I also did my command up in Denver. And at that point, we had evolved to SBIRS. And, you know, amazing to see the transformation in the capability of that squadron, what it was then and how much it's even grown now. But in between, I spent a fair amount of time out at the schoolhouse at Vandenberg, teaching undergraduate space training, teaching space-based missile warning. Did some time at the National Reconnaissance Office in Chantilly. I was a SIGINT guy. Incredibly eye-opening opportunity to see the national side of what we do in space. And really, I think I'm so much more well-rounded from a space perspective because I've been able to see both what we do on the space-based side, on the Air Force space side, versus and also the national space side. So huge opportunity for me. And then somehow, many, many years later, found myself at the White House 2 months after President Trump said, we're going to create the Space Force. And nobody was really sure where we were going when I showed up at the White House. And about 2 weeks in to my journey at the White House, it became very clear that we were going to create the Space Force. And we were going to do it pretty quickly. So the opportunity I had to work at that level and to partner with really the Vice President's team and the National Space Council that was really driving us forward and what that was going to look like, but everybody involved in those interagency discussions, the partnership with NASA, the commercial side. I was just exposed to so many things that I never would have imagined I'd have an opportunity to be a part of. But really to have an opportunity to have a part of the pen in writing and authoring what that policy was going to be, something that, for me then to come here and see it come to fruition and have the cadets that we commission in the Space Force march up on that terrazzo wearing those platinum sashes, and to see it come full circle was just an amazing opportunity that I had, and just couldn't be more proud to be a part of it. So it's been quite the journey.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. That was an amazing day here in the spring where we saw the first Space Force officers commissioned and join General Raymond in the actual Space Force. Fantastic. Just 2 months ago in August, our new Chief of Staff of the Air Force, General Brown, published his Accelerate, Change, or Lose document. That was in August, shortly after he took command. And in it, he stated, and we have a quote we're going to share with the members as well as the viewers. The quote is, "While the creation of the U.S. Space Force enables greater focus on a key domain, it also requires greater integration across the services to deny competitors an exploitable seam between the high ground domains and the cyberspace that connects and enable effects across them all. As airmen, we must think differently about what it means to fly, fight, and win." And in today's day, especially when we look at the perspective that you have, and General Clark as a superintendent, you have a 4-star Space Force general, and you have a 4-star Air Force general. So just last month, General Raymond, the Chief of Space Operations, he put out his own quote. And he said, "In order to be ready for the conflict, we must be bold, we must innovate, and we must move, and we must think faster. And we must empower and leverage the outstanding talent that we have around the force. These imperatives are in the DNA of the Space Force." Phenomenal quote by the CSO as well. But when you look at the two generals, you can see a thread that's weaved in between both of them. And you at the Air Force Academy here in charge with commissioning these cadets have a big role in that. So these messages from both the highest leaders of the Air and Space Forces show just how critical space is as a warfighting domain. General, from your perspective, why is defining space as its own warfighting domain now more than ever vital to the defense of our nation? And if you can even expand upon that, maybe, and with that, can you tell us what are the current threats that we're looking at as a nation? You had a peek under the tent in the White House. It was obviously a big decision to create a new service for this new domain, and any thoughts on that?
Yeah, thanks for that, and I love those quotes. And it's just so refreshing to see how these two service chiefs are going to keep these threads between the two services, and really how we're going to integrate moving forward, but still give the Space Force enough of its own, I think, rope to be a very different service, separate service with its own culture and identity. I think it is imperative upon us to help educate every military member, but also the American population about what that threat is in space. And if you look at the National Defense Strategy from 2018, it's very clear in saying that China is the pacing threat. This is about China and Russia. And this is about near-peer competition and what that means to us to maintain our strategic military advantage. And you can see that so predominantly in what is happening in space, and the threats and capabilities that China and Russia are intending to, I think, induce upon us to ensure that they too can maintain their own strategic military advantage in space. So as we have these conversations about a war-fighting domain in space, what does that mean? What does that mean? What are the threats that we have? What is a threat in space? How do we define a threat on orbit? What does that mean to our on-orbit assets? What does that mean to our capabilities across the globe? What is a hostile act in space? How do we define that? What is hostile intent? What is an act that another nation could take that would lead for us to look at what possible actions we might take to counter that? What authorities does a commander need to maintain the advantage in space? It's pretty clear. If you're in an airplane and you're the pilot and you're shot at, you know exactly what your authority is. That does not extend to space. We have to make sure that the commanders in charge of those assets have the authority that they need to protect and defend those on-orbit assets. So that's why it's a warfighting domain. It's not a warfighting domain because we own X amount of satellites and we need to have, access to them at all times to be able to do what we want to do with those satellites. It's about protecting them. It's about a threat. It's about hostile intent. It's about commander's authority. It's about, if we don't maintain the strategic advantage in space, what happens to us as a nation? If we don't have that, if we're not first, then what happens as a nation? And that's where General Brown goes with these conversations about accelerate, change, or lose. We need to think about what if. We need to think about what if we don't win. We need to think about what if we lose. And that's why he so purposefully chose accelerate, change, or lose, because he is trying to drive us to think about that and build the momentum we need as a nation to maintain that strategic military advantage. And just as you said, the service chiefs are weaving this together. That's what I want for the cadet wing. I want to graduate cadets, whether they go on to be airmen or space professionals, to have an appreciation and understand why a warfighting domain. Every cadet, airman or space professional, needs to walk out of here with the right level of understanding of what it means to have a warfighting domain in space. And I dream of a day where the F-35 cadet is a roommate here with a space professional who's going to go out to the NSDC. And one day they're going to be in an Air Operations Center together, a CAOC together, and they're going to be having conversations about how the F-35, that is the vacuum of a sensor that it is sharing data with our space-based assets, and how they can team together to maintain that that military strategic advantage. That's what the foundation that I want to build in our cadets, who understand how they're going to work together moving forward and what they both bring to the fight based on what they're going to do when they leave the academy. So I'm excited about that.
Yeah, that is fantastic, and it's that it is a competition with China and Russia, similar to a competition with Army and Navy. And like we saw last weekend, I think Air Force showed we want to, just like we want to do with China and Russia, we want to overwhelm the adversary with, they don't know what we're going to do, but when we want to run the ball, we're going to run the ball. When we want the ability to pass the ball, we're going to pass the ball. I think it applies to what we're trying to do in space as well. We want that freedom of action. And I think to the United States citizen, using your ATM, use your ATM card to get cash, to make financial transactions, GPS on your phone. When those things go away, people will appreciate space. So I think it's those messages, like you said, continue to go out to the American public is huge. That being said, the Air Force Academy has naturally always been an air-minded institution. Right. There's memorials all over this place for Lance, Peter, Cy, John, and some of the heroes. The building we're in right now, and many of the buildings around this place, are just named after legends in the Air Force, and that's phenomenal. For a cadet who's sitting here watching this interview going, I want my space history and culture, where would you point to them? Are there some space heroes or legends that you could say, yeah, we have those as well in our community?
Oh, yes, absolutely. And you look at the stats, and I think bragging rights of how many astronauts this institution has produced, 42, I believe. That's pretty impressive for such a small community. You go back to the Mercury program, the Apollo program, Air Force officers, right? This is Air Force heritage. You look at the more recent day. Look at Nick Hague. Unbelievable, the accomplishments of Nick Hague, and unbelievable what he continues to give to this institution and to the local community to share his stories. We're so fortunate to have him. Jack Fisher, and what he has given and done for this institution. General Hyten, how much, how much more could we have at the most senior leader, the number 2 military ranking guy in the Department of Defense is a space professional. I mean, he is an icon to my generation, and to see him sitting as the vice chairman, unbelievable for us. You look at General Chilton. And everything that he did to come back and be the commander of Air Force Space Command, a grad after being an astronaut. General Helms and the legacy that she has left for so many. So there are so many big names out there. You just have to drive out to Schriever, right? And I think also for my generation, that's probably top of the list. Bernie Schriever, and how proud we all were when Falcon became Schriever, and what that means to us, and the legacy of Bernie Schriever. So there's so many of them out there.
Yeah, Nick Hague was, I think when you talk about Commandant of Cadets, every morning you must wake up wondering what spirit missions have been done around this. Nick Hague, class of 1998, I still remember his 20th anniversary, or his graduation, had the ultimate spirit mission where his class put a 98 out there on the terrazzo, and he took a picture from space. And ever since that day, everybody's like, okay, that's the ultimate spirit mission.
Yeah, who's going to top that?
It was pretty phenomenal. And Nick Hague actually just recently in the last week came out and talked about the new course that's going to come out in January. Similar to a test pilot syllabus, but it's going to be available for officers, enlisted, and civilians, which I think, again, is baked in the history of the Air Force of test pilot, but with a space mindset, and Nick's got his fingerprints all over that, yes. So I agree, he's a legend. So as you are now charged with commissioning officers into the Space Force and the Air Force, and you look at the institutional outcomes from the Air Force Academy and what do we need, what does the Space Force, what does General Raymond need for you in this institution out of its new officers going into the Space Force? Is it different than the Air Force? Is it similar? Or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and I think that's a great question. And I have to start with, he needs us to be the Space Force's Academy, right? Yes, we're the United States Air Force Academy to support the Department of the Air Force, and we are just as much the Air Force's Academy as we are the Space Force's Academy. And I think that as soon as we knew the Space Force was going to come to fruition, this institution tried to turn that as much as possible to show General Raymond and the Space Force that we are just as committed to producing the right lieutenant for him, if it's a lieutenant, space professional, just as we are to producing the right airman and second lieutenant for the United States Air Force. But there's a lot of things we need to talk about. What kind of individual does General Raymond need to secure that innovative, competitive advantage that he needs in the Space Force? And I think he needs a very diverse set of officers to do that for him. He needs people that are innovative, that are forward-thinking, that are strategic-minded, that understand the engineering piece of satellite design and physics and what it is we need, orbital mechanics. But he also needs people that are warfighters. This is a warfighting domain, and we need to make sure we're giving him the opportunity to recruit the right amount from a very diverse population set. So I'm excited about the kinds of cadets that are interested in going to the Space Force. And I think that we're going to present him, plenty that will give him a very diverse group of people to pick from. I also think that we really need to help him set the tone for the culture of the Space Force, and at the appropriate time in their cadet development, that we give them the right exposure to what that culture is going to be. There's a large part of their development that is just learning how to be a cadet in the Cadet Wing and the basics of military life. But at some point in that 4-year development, we need to start to expose them to that culture. And that culture is going to be very different than the Air Force culture. So I think to do that, we've partnered with General Raymond to make sure we get the right cadre back here, the right permanent party, the right AOCs and AMTs, faculty members that are going to bring that culture with them of who he believes the Space Force is today, so that we have the right people to expose those future space professionals to in their time at the Academy. And we're committed to doing that. Great partnership with General Raymond and his team. Standing up the detachment here with Colonel Greenwood was a great step. He's already done tremendous things to help us, I think, build those connections and do what we can to support the Chief of Space Operations and the Space Force here.
Yeah, I like how the diversity of thought and the diversity of talents that we need to develop here at the Academy to go into the Space Force, I can't help but think of 2020 graduate Second Lieutenant Kyle Johnson.
Yeah, yes,
Who,
great example.
starting linebacker,
Right.
3.93 GPA, and he's at Harvard right now. He's working with the Space Force Associates. He's trying to join a professional organization, and he wants a place to publish his thoughts. He's going to write while he's at Harvard. He's going to interact with some of the nation's best at Harvard. He chose to go space. He wants to go space. The guy's got warrior ethos. Yep. He's obviously brilliant, and we're excited to have him in the Space Force Association as well as the Space Force. So I think that's a good example and a good lead into this next question where, the Space Force was created last December. And then just a few months later, as the Academy navigated through the challenges but yet opportunities of COVID, can you tell us a little bit about those first graduates, those first Academy graduates, what was different, what was similar, and the celebration of them entering and joining General Raymond into the Space Force?
Yeah, I think, first, just what an amazing opportunity. I mean, those lieutenants wrote history that day standing on the terrazzo with those platinum sashes. What is it like for the rest of your life to be the number 2 guy, officer, that was assessed into the United States Space Force? For the rest of your life, you were the second one. I mean, that person's name will likely be remembered forever, just like General Raymond's, right, as the first chief of staff. The excitement that those young officers had, the investment General Raymond made, I think, into them, the commitment that he made, the time that he spent with them. I mean, he's always traditionally, he'll have them over to his house, the cadets that are going to be 13 Sierras coming out of here. He made a similar investment into that group, coming here, spending time with them, looking for really good opportunities for them as they awaited starting space training, looking for opportunities for them to go have miniature internships within industry, to give them exposure to the future, the exact same things that General Raymond wants to bring into the Space Force, send them into industry to get them exposure to that. So they have that before they've even entered undergraduate space training. So such an investment, such amazing opportunities. And he could do that because it was such a small group. But I think that's his vision for the Space Force, because it's going to remain so small. We're going to be able to truly invest at the individual level with the development of the officers, with the enlisted members, to ensure that we are absolutely creating the kind of leader, the kind of thinker, strategizer, future thinker that we need in the Space Force. And that's a luxury that is really hard when you look at an organization as big as the United States Air Force that he's going to have with the Space Force. So the opportunities that they've already had, that they're going to continue to get, unbelievable. And that doesn't matter if you're a space operator, if you're some of the common AFSCs, the intel guys, the cyber guys, acquisition guys, they're all going to get unbelievable opportunities. And I think they're going to get amazing leadership opportunities as lieutenants that typically they probably wouldn't get until they're a little bit more senior and have a little bit more experience, just because they're part of building it from the ground up. And I'm envious of them for what they're getting to do.
Yeah, I am too. The opportunity to lead in the Air Force is right out of the Academy will likely be different than right into the Space Force right out of the Academy. And leading in industry, leading civilians in industry, when you're embedded in those companies. SpaceX, for example, recently they and United States Transportation Command just announced a partnership to redefine what we think of as space lift. Yes. If we need to move forces across the globe using space lift to get someplace, General Lyons, the Commander of Transportation Command, yesterday talked about moving a C-17 amount of cargo, in a much shorter time than we can in a traditional airplane. But the Space Force members will be able to see that in industry and learn from that industry and maybe bring some of the good parts of the culture back into the Space Force. It's exciting. So we had about 86 cadets that were out here on the terrazzo. Do you think the number will stay close to that in future years? And then, of course, it depends. But in the next, say, 3 to 5 years, do you think it's going to be around 90 to 100, or where do you see that going?
I think it'll stay close. I think the ask this year is 100 in total. I think 60-ish space operators, and then the additional almost 40 would be those common AFSCs again. I think the number is about 130 total officers commissioned into the Space Force from all of the commissioning sources. So I think, you know, the Space Force isn't intended to grow significantly more than what it was when it was part of the Air Force. And so this isn't about creating a huge bureaucratic organization. It's about being very lean and only doing what they have to do for their mission set. So the way they will organize an installation in a base, very different than what we're traditionally used to seeing, which is going to give them, I think, the luxury of focusing solely on the mission. And so I wouldn't expect those numbers to grow very much. Now, of course, we're going to have to evolve what the support tail looks like in the future. How do we really do this to support a separate service? So sure, we'll continue, I think, to relook those things moving forward, but I think it'll stay pretty consistent.
Yeah, thank you. I think many are trying to find comparisons as they talk about the creation of deltas. What is a delta? A lot of new terminology. It's exciting times, but people can't help but go back to, so what would that be in the Army? What would that be in the Air Force? And they like to go to the Navy model a lot, whether it's on an installation, a Navy base, where Marines will be there, and maybe the Navy is providing a lot of the support functions and the Marines focus on the mission, as you described with the Space Force. Right. And that leads me to think of the Naval Academy. The Naval Academy has the same, they're charged with the same mission. They need to commission officers into two different forces with two different missions and different cultures. So I think for our viewers and for our members, think Naval Academy. You're going to have, we've talked about football many times in this interview, but you're going to have football players from the Naval Academy that go into the Navy and go into the Marines, and we're going to have the same thing here. Have you talked to your counterpart about Navy lessons? I'm sure you have lessons learned through their large history. They've been at this a lot longer, and do you see some things that maybe you can take from Navy to bring here?
Yes, absolutely, and you know that's the first thing we did was send a team to Annapolis to spend a week and really learn, how do you do this? What does it look like here? And I think a lot of what Cap Greenwood has done with the detachment here was modeled after what they're doing at Annapolis and how they support that. I would think ratios also about the same based on the size of the Marine Corps compared to the Navy, the size of the Space Force compared to the Air Force, ensuring we have about the appropriate ratio of blue-threaded Space Force members here on the staff to be able to support the number of officers that we will commission here. So we kind of followed their model for that. We're looking at that cultural thing and where in their development process do they do that. I think that, they are midshipmen the majority of their time their entire time that they're at the U.S. Naval Academy. And then once they get close to that commissioning point, they go to Leatherneck. And that's kind of their transition for, I think that this Marine Corps is really, what I want to do, and I'm a fit. We're looking at what does a transition look like here once we believe that those are the cadets that are going to go Space Force, to start to expose them even more to what that culture will look like. So we're looking at a similar paradigm that Annapolis has as well. So I think we've learned a lot of good lessons.
That's good. That makes sense. And one of the jobs that you're charged with as the Commandant of Cadets, the deans is very clear. If you were to tell a civilian that doesn't know much about a military academy, you say the dean and they think academics. You say athletic department, they think athletics. You say Commandant of Cadets and they probably go a little cross-eyed for a few moments. But for our viewers and our members, the Commandant of Cadets is very much in charge of the training, and especially the military training of the cadets here. And throughout its history, the Air Force Academy has offered aviation programs, basic free fall, gliders, powered flight. It goes on and on. Do you see any changes to the training that you guys would be interested in maybe pursuing for the Space Force cadets that want to go into the Space Force, and just interested in your thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. And the dean's already done a lot of great things. She's already got a lot of good programs. Creating this space as a warfighting domain minor, I think, will be huge with educating a larger percentage of the population and exposing them to that. So I'm excited about that. What they do with FalconSat, the building and designing of satellites, just unbelievable what those cadets do down there. But yes, when you think of the Air Force Academy, I think most people think of aviation, as they should, and the airfield. Airfield is an incredible place. The opportunities our cadets have at that airfield are unbelievable. The gold standard, I think. What does that look like on the space side? I want to create the airfield equivalent for the Space Force. How do we do that here at USAFA? So CAP, and we even spoke to General Raymond about 2 weeks ago about what does that look like? How do we do that here? Part of it is just really taking advantage of living in Colorado Springs and the opportunities that we have, and structuring those in a way that the cadets get the right exposure to all of the amazing space missions that are local in Colorado Springs and Denver. There's so much we could already do just with that. But I think there's more we can do. I think we can get more data here. I think we can get them exposed to more training simulators. I think there's a lot of opportunity that we can partner with the Space Force so that we have an airfield equivalent for the cadets that want to be space professionals. So I'm excited about that.
Yeah, I'm excited to see that as well. And the dean came out this summer and created a new major, a data science major,
Yes.
which I think is hand in glove with the Space Force. And the Air Force Academy has always prided itself on all the elements: athletics, academics, character development, military training, working together to create this final product. And I think that'll be interesting. But General Raymond has recently also said that the Space Force will be the first digital service. Yeah. And that's interesting. What does this mean, and are there any opportunities available to cadets to practice innovating and developing skills and ideas to support this digital service concept that the CSO has talked about?
Yeah, I'm excited about this digital service conversation, and I didn't really know anything about this digital twin thing, this digital world, until I had the privilege of going on a trip to General Dynamics and seeing how they did the digital twin for all of their aircraft engines, and really understanding what advantage that gave them. And so as I continue to hear the talk from the Secretary of the Air Force about where we're going with the digital series and the E-series for future aircraft development and design, and seeing the same thing on the spacecraft design piece, I have such a better appreciation now for what that will allow us to do, not just from a design capability and I think an efficiency in design and efficiency in production, but really from a predictive maintenance perspective. This isn't going to be about, hey, it's just time to do preventative maintenance because we say it's time. It's going to create a world where we do things at the right time based on the cycle and life stage of that vehicle, not just because we think we have to. And I think that we will continue to see that we get a lot more return on the spacecraft that we put on orbit, because we're a lot smarter about how we deal with them and the things that we see, and how we can analyze and troubleshoot problems on the ground for systems on orbit. So I'm excited about that part. And then how do we bring that here? We've really gone a long way with our internal, I think, USAFA Spark Cell, and where we're going with our own innovation teams here. When I got here last summer, we created an innovation officer for every squadron, and mandated that we had to have one in every squadron. And mandate sounds wrong because they want to do it. I assure you, it is a highly sought after, coveted position. And we elevated that to a wing staff level position to show the importance of it. So the things that these cadets are doing now down in our Spark Cell, partnering with the CyberWorks team, they are out in front. We've even partnered them with what's going on with the SpaceWorks guys and the teams down at Peterson. So I think we've built that connection, and that's really what this is about. Having our own Spark Cell here is building connections with this institution and every other SpaceWorks, CyberWorks, AFWorks kind of organization across the Department of the Air Force, so that we build that connective tissue here so our cadets can get tied in and have the same exposure. So I think we are well on our way to making sure the cadets have the connections to do those things, to get hard problems to solve, and unbelievable the problems that those cadets solve for us, the connections that they build, the things they get access to during their time at the academy. So I think we're on the right path to doing more of that here at USAFA.
Yeah, I think that you bring up a F-35 fifth generation fighter, and I can't help but think of, imagine that cadet that graduates, goes into the Air Force, but his roommate is a space operator, and the F-35 pilot might have even gotten a minor in space here.
Right,
so
that's like a dream.
Imagine the capability that that individual has and the background that we didn't have at this place years ago. It's really incredible, as the entire Department of Defense is talking about joint all-domain command and control. What does that mean? As we use data, as we use artificial intelligence to take some of the human element out, because we can go quicker, faster, stronger, be more lethal, and ultimately deter in the space domain. Everything you're saying is just fantastic, and we as the Space Force Association are so proud to have you as the Commandant of Cadets. That is really fantastic, and we appreciate your time today. Any last thoughts you'd like to share with our members or our viewers?
Well, and I have to say thank you to you for what you're doing. And I think, stepping out and, filling a void from the beginning to help the community move us forward and to have the right representation and advocacy. So you saw a need, and you've got a great team that I think is filling a void that the Space Force, but the entire community is very grateful for. So thank you to that, and I'm excited to see where it goes. I'm just so excited to be a part of it, and I had an opportunity to have a front row seat as we've come this far. So thanks, Matt.
Yeah, thank you for your time today, and thank you to General Clark and your entire team here at the Academy. Semper Supra, and always go beat Navy,
That's
beat
right.
Army.
Beat Army next.
Let's do it.
That's right.
Thank you, man. Appreciate
Thanks,
it.
Matt. Thank you. Thanks.